Hi, welcome to this vodcast. In this vodcast, we're going to actually look at the role that biology plays in classical conditioning. So this again is a factor that was kind of put to the side and disregarded by Pavlov and Skinner as not being necessarily very important in associative learning, the biological differences between different species. So again, we'll take a look at these two assumptions that Pavlov made. So we're dealing with classical conditioning again here. Remember, you can pause me at any time. All right, so Garcia and Koelling's taste aversion studies really started to highlight the concept of biological preparedness that we talked about in class. That's on the PowerPoint that's posted. Myers talks about in terms of biological constraints on classical conditioning. So in Garcia and Koelling's study, what they really revealed was that not all neutral stimuli can become conditioned stimuli. So again, this was an assumption that Pavlovian conditioning assumed about how associative learning works. I want to make sure that this is a more nuanced point. It's not just that he was wrong. It's not just that not all neutral stimuli can become a conditioned stimuli. It's also that certain neutral stimuli are more effective at becoming a conditioned stimuli. It happens more quickly. The more ecologically relevant it is, the learning is more durable. So it's not just that he was completely wrong, it's that it was an incomplete picture of how a neutral stimuli can become a conditioned stimuli. The second thing that's important is in the case of taste aversions occur after one pairing. Even when the nausea did not immediately follow the neutral stimulus. So again, in classic Pavlovian conditioning, acquisition occurs after numerous pairings of the neutral stimulus and conditioned stimulus. And so the example there is like, why wouldn't taste aversion be so strong after just one pairing? Why would associative learning seem to skip the acquisition part and just automatically be acquired? Well, because learning what's poisonous and what's potentially going to make us sick helps us survive. Okay, and here's a little update. We did this, not an update, here's a review of the Garcia and Koelling study. And what I really want to point out is, I know we went over this in class, let's again look at this one right here. So Pavlov would have predicted if I kept giving the sweet water followed by the electric shock, eventually the sweet water would become a conditioned stimulus, and the conditioned response should have been fear, right? Because when the rat gets electrocuted, it has a fear response. That never happened. It never happened. The rat never learned to fear the sweet water or have a fear response. So why is that? So again, Garcia and Koelling's work suggests that the rat is not biologically prepared to associate these two stimuli. And it was biologically prepared to associate these two stimuli, the nausea, right, with something it ingested, even though the nausea was hours later. So biological preparedness seems to work here and to reveal the limits and the ability of classical conditioning to work even after one pairing. In your book, they gave the cool example of the Japanese quail. Here we have a male quail and a female quail. So in terms of their mating rituals, it's very different than humans. A receptive female with the lighter coloring usually has to present itself to the male. The presentation of the receptivity then excites the male, and then they will mate. And so what they started doing is, prior to showing a sexually receptive female, they would shine a bright red light. And eventually, the bright red light would actually get the male quail excited. They measured that in numerous ways. It's in your book, but basically the red light became a conditioned stimulus for sexual excitation. But what they found out is, yeah, that did work. But they also played around with other neutral stimuli. And one was a stuffed quail's head. This is the best I could find. It's not necessarily the one they used, but they would show a stuffed quail head and then the female, sexually receptive female. And what they found was this neutral stimuli obviously became a conditioned stimuli after acquisition, but because it was more ecologically relevant, learning was faster, and the learning was stronger and more durable, less prone to extinction. So the more ecologically relevant the neutral stimulus that becomes the conditioned stimulus is, the more durable the learning is. Again, biology matters in classical conditioning.